obviously law reform is needed all around the world with regards to so many aspects of crime and punishment. And one particular thing is punishing the parents who are failing in their duties and their responsibilities when their children commit crimes. So for example, and I think there is a little bit of a turn in the tide in America with regards to this subject, for example, when a troubled teenager is bought a gun by a parent and then that gun is used in a school shooting, or parents that simply do not lock up all their weapons. They're not following the laws of their state or county, what have you, and weapons are easily accessible by irresponsible, immature, volatile teenagers. And there's a case in Australia where I really feel we need this type of action. It's just so clear. The parents of young children and teenagers committing crimes can so often be found to be super negligent, to be lacking in common sense, to be enablers, and to simply not be taking the precautions that they know they need to take, whether it's a kind of denial or laziness or just perfect proof that there is always a root cause. Perhaps when things go wrong, these things don't happen in a vacuum. So Bridgette Porter, she's from a small country town near a place called Orange in rural New South Wales. She's a lovely young girl who is popular, creative, loving. Her mum and dad have separated. Her father was a bank manager or a banker working somewhere else. And the mother at the time of Bridget's murder did have, it was the mother's time for caring for Bridget, and something had come up with the mother, I think, and she was supposed to be taking Bridget to visit with her parents, and then something came up for the parents and she couldn't be dropped off there. So in the way of the law, which I don't think is very fair, people's identities are protected. She's dropped Bridget off at a farm where she stayed in the past many times, and from what I can understand, it's her aunts and uncles with some cousins, and she's supposed to be going there to stay for a week. And I think on the second day that she's there, she is violently murdered by a 14-year-old child in that home. She's chopped into pieces with a tomahawk. So this happened in 2020. So this 14-year-old girl, the parents knew that this was a very troubled child with thoughts of homicide, with homicidal ideation, who had expressed a desire to kill, who in the years prior to murdering Bridgette Porter, who was known as Biddy, She had been killing farm animals. For example, 6 chickens on the farm. When asked why she did that, the reason was, I just wanted to. She was gifted knives, and she had 4 knives, and they had names like, I don't know, I can't remember, Skid and Joe and Flash and Roo, something like that. And nearer to the time of the murder, so bearing in mind this is a homicidal child, very deeply troubled, has killed farm animals, she's then given for a present a tomahawk by her father. The tomahawk she killed Bridget with and chopped her up with. She called this tomahawk Tom. And this child, this 14-year-old child who would be an adult now and is walking among us, has her identity protected, is receiving psychiatric care, received all sorts of supports and help whilst incarcerated. I think it was decided that they would go for a mental health defence or something like that. Sorry, I don't have a lot of the facts just at my fingertips. And meanwhile, you know, the family, the parents, haven't been able to talk about Bridget and tell her story. And this is utterly wrong. There have been 0 repercussions. I mean, apart from, I guess they're living with whatever's going on as well. But, there's absolute enablers. After the fact, rather than the usual thing that you might expect from the parent of a murderer, we get the same shit that these weak enablers seem to dole out in these situations. Oh, it was an accident. So there was tension in the household. This girl was known to be maniacal and homicidal and very troubled. She was known as a creep, a weirdo. I mean, it's a bit sad, but she was openly called this at her school. And the night before, Bridget had called her these things and said, there had been some conversation at the dinner table and she'd been confronted, why don't you like me, or something like that. And Bridget had said, well, because you're creepy, you're weird. And the next morning, the plan was that Bridget would go with the mum, with the other 2 little girls, the sisters of the 14-year-old. She would go and milk the cow. And she woke up, but she was very, very sleepy. And the mother decided that it was okay to leave this vulnerable 10-year-old with this homicidal maniac alone in the home. This homicidal maniac had actually threatened to kill her parents. She had told the parents she wanted to kill. In text messages to a friend, she has said, I'm standing in my parents' bedroom holding whichever knife she named. The night before, because there were arguments and dissent, guess what the little punishment was for this little homicidal maniac? The mother took 2 of her knives away from her, 2 of her knives and a PlayStation or something like that. I can't remember. But, this is something we need reform for, don't you think? Why are those parents not held up as responsible for what was to follow? Why can the parents of this murdered child not get some sort of sense of further justice? The murderer is out living her life. She's probably got a new name and all sorts of support. they don't have their daughter, and the people that allowed the situation to occur are free as well and living their lives. You know, no doubt suffering, of course, but you have to wonder, don't you? You have to wonder about the mentality. And then again, when you've got that type of mentality, it's kind of not a surprise when there is such great dysfunction. Now, they had requested some support. They wanted their daughter to be assessed at a mental health facility or something, and they were waiting. But hey, while you're waiting, how about you supervise your little psychopath at all times, take away her knives, her tomahawk. You know, if someone expresses suicidal ideation, if someone says to you they're thinking about killing themselves, you ask them, have you thought how you would do that? And if they say, yes, I'd shoot myself or I'd drive my car into a tree. Well, do you leave them with the car keys? Do you leave the gun in the house with them? No, you take those things away. And yet, this girl is clearly deeply psychologically troubled. She wants to try and feel something. She can't feel anything. She needs it to be urgent and intense for her to have feelings. And they are arming her with dangerous knives, you know, really serious weapons, and a tomahawk, because they're nurturing the fascinations that she had. She expressed interest in. Do you know what the game was she wanted to play with Bridget the night before? Serial killers, where the young children run away, so her two younger siblings and Bridget, they run away, and she would pursue them as if she was a serial killer. Well, guess what? She was pursuing Bridget, holding one of her knives. Bridget had a wound on her hand, and she'd obviously been quite frightened, was trying to get away, and she'd maybe cut her hand on barbed wire or something like that. I can't remember. Sorry, I'm really yelling and talking quite urgently at you. But yeah, it's, you know, we're at a position, you know, we're at a time, you know, we're in a place and time and everything where we're so far down the track with a lot of stuff. It's really hard to fix things properly, you know, and lots of things happen by sort of poking around in the middle of things. And really, you can't fix things by just poking around in the middle of things, you know. You need to start from the foundation. But, you know, we've got just such a big mess, haven't we, as far as where we've found ourselves, our society and our civilization. And nothing is easy. It's not an easy fix. And it's not to say that all parents, because I mean, I guess this is the fear that, you know, if reform happens like that, then parents who really are not responsible for their children's crimes in any way, you know, can be unfairly victimized, unfairly charged and punished, you know. That's not what I'm saying. It's just there's these clear cases. I feel exactly the same, even though I'd love to give her more compassion, because I think she was probably exhausted and at the end of her tether. But, you know, I feel the same about Candace, Clarissa's, well, the grandmother is Deborah Mutton, and she let her granddaughter, who was in her care because her own daughter was a drug addict, she let that little girl go with the drug addict daughter and the daughter's drug addict, violent boyfriend She let this child go away on a holiday, and that little child ended up in a barrel in a river. So, shot in the head. And if she needed help, there needs to be more help, and people need to be able to speak out. But she had expressed that she was exhausted, she wanted a break, she couldn't do it, she was tired. It'll be a decision that she absolutely regrets, but it was a decision that wasn't hers to make for a 10-year-old child, or 9 years old. I can't remember how old this little girl was, but I've spoken about this before on my channel. But that wasn't her decision. If she needed respite or something, she needed to work out how to make arrangements. She should be legally accountable for her failure to act as the guardian of this child. She made a really poor decision. And the child paid with her life. And I'm not saying it's the grandmother's, responsibility entirely to raise her granddaughter, but, she'd obviously put herself forward to look after this child rather than let this child be put into foster care. So that was a wonderful thing. But what she agreed to do was keep this child safe and keep this child in her custody. And it wasn't her life plan. Of course not. But what was the child's life plan? To die in the way that she did and to be treated in the way she was after her death? Put into a barrel and pushed into a river? These poor decisions, they seem way too easy to make. Way too easy to make. Or, is it because having alternatives and help is too difficult? How hard would it have been for the mother of the 14-year-old homicidal maniac to simply insist that Bridget still just comes with her to milk the cow, rather than say, oh, you're tired, oh, look, I guess things will be all right, we're only going to be in half an hour or an hour. They came back to find the house covered in blood and Bridget hacked into pieces. Her father wasn't allowed to touch this child's body at the funeral, except just touch her foot. Why? Because her body would have fallen apart. That's what he was told by a forensic social worker that was with him. You can't touch her, she hasn't been put back together. That is horrific. Kids that have taken guns to school, the parents have been told, come and get your son, and they do nothing about it. Is that the Crumleys or whatever have you? It's the excuses afterwards that just make me sick, To say, oh, this was an accident? What sort of accident? That just, on top of everything, the disrespect, and, just to double down. I guess it's, it feels natural to some people that to really support and stand by and everything. But that's not real love. That's how these things happen, isn't it? is to turn blind eyes and make excuses and not give tough love. And the parents to say, we didn't think she really meant it. When this child was saying, hey, I'm thinking about killing you and Dad and killing my sisters, killing my family. And they just brush it off and they buy her weapons. What sort of warped death wish is that? And they should have said, I'm sorry, Mother, that you're in a jam and that you now have Bridget. Make other arrangements. At the moment, we are going through a crisis. But no, their face is more important to them. Just hide it. Keep it quiet. Keep it silent. Don't be embarrassed. Don't bring up something shameful. That's less important than keeping someone safe. So Bridget, who had stayed at this farm in the past, but I don't know when, but I really do think it was her cousins, which means, this is the relation, this is sibling relations to probably the mother who dropped this poor child off there. They haven't had the decency to say, they don't need to tell the whole story, but they don't have the decency to say, hey, it's really not a good time. We're truly going through something at the moment. And then they don't have the further decency when they have allowed a vulnerable person to come to the farm. This was the perfect victim, wasn't it? Just delivering someone younger, smaller, vulnerable. They just have her delivered there. And then they leave her alone. The father had gone to work. It was at 6:30 in the morning. Father's driven off to work and Mum decides, it'll be all right. She'll be right, mate. What is this cavalier attitude? It's as if there is something inside them that just wants to see what will happen. I really think that is fucking psychopathic. And it is. It's like they just really want to see if it will happen. And there's something really, really off. Anyway, that was a long, long moan, wasn't it, about that? But what do you guys think? What do you think about the responsibilities of people when they don't take reasonable actions, when they are aware of something and they don't make things safe? They're basically, putting loaded guns in people's hands, or they're putting weapons into hands and turning their backs and just, hey, like a roll of the dice. That risk-taking, there's something pathological about it. It's nearly like they want something to happen. I just can't explain it. But what do you guys think? Obviously there would have to be very high standards of evidence, but when it's proven that, say, your son has fantasized about being a school shooter, has written this down in his journals, has drawn pictures of himself shooting fellow students, expressing bloodlust, expressing violent urges, and you buy him a weapon, you buy him a gun. That to me, that is very clear. When a young teen, maybe because she was 14, maybe because she was a girl, but why wouldn't you take that seriously? When a 14-year-old has expressed that they want to murder you, that they want to murder your other children, when they have been murdering animals, when a regular game of hide and seek isn't enough they have to make it into a game of serial killer to give it edge. That was her description. Well, I need it to have edge. It gives it more edge. Because clearly she's having trouble feeling anything that is positive, happy, joyful, tender, innocent. And she wants to feel so badly, and so she's thinking about taking life, about hurting, about destruction, about creating fear. And that is giving her feeling. I mean, that is terrifying. And that is the person the parents knew her to be. They were just pushing it aside, turning a blind eye. And, you could say, okay, well, denial is very strong. That is not denial. Surely that is, sorry, my whistle. Surely that's not denial, is it? It's something else. It's something more sinister. That's what I think. And they've given her weapons, and then they've given her a victim, and they've given her the opportunity. They are part of that heinous crime. Yeah. See you later.